Welcome to Substance Free 02043. I'm your host, Kristen Root, and I am Program Director for Hingham Cares. Our mission is to reduce substance use among youth in our community, and we do that through education and through informing teens, parents, and the general public about the risks of underage substance use. With us today are our guests, Kathi and Chris Sullivan of Sullivan's Message and Taylor's Message. Welcome, Kathi and Chris. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Kristen, for having us again.
It's good to be here.
I'd like to start and have you tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Sure. Well, my name's Kathi Sullivan, and this is my cute, adorable husband, Christopher, next to me. We did meet in 2009, actually, so we just celebrated our 12th anniversary. 13, somewhere around 13. There, yes. And I will share with you that my daughter Taylor was the one that introduced us. And unfortunately, she did introduce us from up above because my daughter passed away in 2008 from underage drinking after a series of homecoming parties on that fateful night on Friday, on October 17th, 2008. I unfortunately lost her that following weekend after a long search, and somehow I stood up at my first school 2 months later to discuss it, to be able to share what happened in hopes that something good would come from it. And my husband, Chris, actually was living down the road from me, did not know him, and he came to my first parent night. So I spoke to the kids 2 months after Taylor had passed away from underage drinking her senior year, and then I wanted to do a parent night, share everything that I wish I had done differently. And my husband, Chris, was in the audience. And Chris, why don't you share with them why you were in the audience?
Well, first of all, it was my high school, my North Attleboro High School, the school I went to growing up. But I was there 5 weeks sober. I struggled for years with alcohol and heroin addiction, pain pills, pretty much everything. But yeah, so my sponsor, the guy that helped get me sober, was friends with Kathi. He kind of is the one that helped her just to stand up and speak the first few times. So he dragged me along, and I was doing anything he asked me to do at the time. And he said, "Hey, listen, you're going to come to this parent night, and you're going to listen to this lady and kind of hear what, alcohol, the destructive nature of it, the other side of it, not the side you see in the commercials." And I went there and I sat in back and I wanted nothing to do with her. I actually, the crazy part is when I left, I was like, man, I got problems. Like my life was upside down, but I'm like, it could be worse, after listening to her. And I knew her sister and her sister had kids, and I had, ex-girlfriend with kids, kind of stepkids. And I don't know. I didn't meet her that night. I saw her that night. I don't know if we briefly met that night or said hello, but
I think you ran away.
It's crazy. It's crazy that, we travel around and talk about the destructive nature and alcohol and drugs and all that, and that's what it brought us together. So the thing that flipped our lives upside down and changed them is the same thing that kind of brought us together. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you've told your story many times over the years,
yes.
And it can't get any easier, I'm sure. It doesn't get any easier with the retelling of it. But could you share what happened to Taylor that night?
Absolutely. It has been 14 years that I have been sharing this story. Actually, it'll be 14 years this January. And it was homecoming game. My daughter was 17. She was this beautiful little blonde thing celebrating her senior year, enjoying every moment of it. Small history. We grew up in Plainville, Mass., so we've been in our own town forever, so we had that type of hometown mentality. Taylor was a senior in high school, like I said, and it was homecoming game, and she went off to her homecoming game, but prior to that game, she went to a couple of different parties. And at those different parties, there was obviously underage drinking involved, and then she went to the homecoming game on Friday, and they won. King Philip High School was where my Tay went to school. And after the homecoming game, what happened was 22 of her friends decided that they wanted to go party some more. And where those kids went was actually to an old abandoned airport in Norfolk. And there was a campfire that was set up, and she just went over there with her friends just to have a good time, is what they all thought. I did find out on Saturday morning that she was missing because she was having a sleepover that night, like most teenage girls do. She had been doing it forever. We've been in the same town forever. So when I found out that Saturday morning that she wasn't where she was supposed to be, the search began that afternoon. So, unfortunately, we were in Norfolk, and there was over 600 people searching for my poor child that weekend. And we did not find her on Saturday. We did not find her on Sunday. It took all till Monday morning that she was actually discovered. And she had actually drowned in only 2 feet of water. As a 5'7" young lady, to imagine that being how my daughter would pass was absolutely incredible to have to walk that path. And that morning when I left that field, I left that field as well as a different person, similar to what I share with people. When you go through something like that, your world changes. And I left that field, and I remember driving home with my son, who was 19 at the time. And as I drove home and I had to go back to my house, I couldn't do it. I actually went to my sister's house, and I stayed there for over a month. As you can imagine, we're not wanting to go back to your reality. And somehow, right before her funeral, I sat down and I wrote her eulogy. And I said, this is going to make a difference. And honestly, Kristen, I never should have been able to do that at that point in my life. I should have never been able to have some sort of message to be able to give. So I know that everything happens for a reason, and I can sit here and I can see you tearing up a little bit. Yeah. It affects everybody. This world that we're in, everybody has something happen to them. And somehow I stood up at my first school 2 months later, like I told you. And I just pleaded with the kids the first time. I said, please make good choices. And over the years, it has changed. It's changed. The message has never changed because I always just share the story of what happened with Taylor to the kids so that they can make better choices. But the result is the same. Like the amazing things that happen from those conversations with those students at schools and the parents at night are absolutely incredible. And as Chris said, some of our most beautiful things have come out from such a horrible tragedy in our family. And my family has changed, obviously, and we'll talk about that more later. But the messages from Taylor's message and from Chris's, Not in Playbook is what we call his program. It's incredible what happens. And I can share with you, as a mom who have lost my only daughter, I would not go back and change anything, actually, because I wouldn't have had what came out of Taylor's life be what it is today. So, right. As tough as it is to talk about it, and we talk a lot, we go wherever we're called, it has a purpose. And, Taylor's done more in her little 17 years of her life than most people will do in a lifetime. So, you have to play the cards you're handed, and it's been amazing what has happened so far.
Well, that's remarkable. You have a remarkable story yourself. I mean, you share Taylor's story, you share this cautionary word to kids and to parents, but the fact that you yourself are so resilient and you've come out of such tragedy and turned it into something that's a positive message or an important message for parents and for kids is just incredibly impressive.
Yes, and it's funny, I just saw you hesitate when you said positive message. It is a positive message. It is tough to
say that it's
right?
positive.
It is. No,
yes.
But it is. It truly is.
It's a positive mission.
It is a positive mission and a positive message, because I think when the kids hear Chris and our story, it hits home because it's just a conversation. Like I just said to you when we walked in here, it's just a conversation.
Right.
And it's those conversations that are changing things. So
right.
It's okay. Yes.
Well, thank you for that. Chris, you have a personal story yourself of addiction to substances. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's, man, if you asked me when I was younger, I'd be sitting in a room like this talking about this. I thought I was the farthest thing. I guess I had the stigma in my head. Like, I thought I was the farthest person away from someone that would struggle with substances or addiction or anything like that. growing up, I was a good kid, and I was quiet, and I always did the right thing, and I was on time, and I didn't talk back, and I didn't miss practice, and I did pretty good in school, and I didn't give my parents a hard time, and I just didn't know what I didn't know. Looking back, like I fit every criteria for someone struggling with substances, whether it was alcohol or drugs. I had the insecurities, I had the doubts, I had the anxiety, I had the depression, I had the self-esteem issues, and I at least for me personally, I masked everything, and I started doing that when I was young. I got good at sports, and I figured if I always did the right thing, people would really never know what was going on really inside, yeah, sports became my outlet, and I did well, and I was very successful, and I got a scholarship and played in the NFL for the Patriots and Steelers, and then when my identity got taken away, my life spiraled. But like I said, I honestly heard people come in and speak to our different teams, and I heard people in college, and I always sat back and I listened, and I was polite like always, but I used to look at the person and say, I'm nothing like them. When the scary part is, like, I was just like them. And a lot of what I talk about in my messages, like, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew, like most people that, turn to substances, some sort of mental health or trauma issue. You walk into any meeting hall, AA meetings, NA meetings, or whatever type of meeting, and 90% of the time the people get up and talk, they felt just like me as a kid. And that's the thing, because like when I go into especially in the schools, I've had so many kids come up to me after and say, I feel just like you, or parents, my kid's just like you. And I'm like, that's 90% of that's pretty good. But you need to pay attention to the other 10%, because even though I was successful in life, I never wanted to be me, if that makes sense. I always wanted to be someone else, that someone that could sit in front of a camera and be comfortable. Or I always tell people now, I always wished I could be like my wife acts now. Where you're just comfortable in any situation. You talk to people. You like being around people. And
I think you're doing a great job.
No. It's funny. Like I can do it in spurts at this point. Mm-hmm. I've come a long way, but even before every school, I'm hiding, and I don't know if I should give my secret away. Usually, I'm sitting in the bathroom, in one of the little stalls, and I'm praying. But that's just me. And after doing it 300 or 400 times, it's always going to be me, but I don't know. It's such an important thing to us. I would not be here. I would not have got up in a school if it wasn't for her. I think some other people would have forced me for a little while.
But she's brought that out in you in a positive way.
Yes, and we are so I think this is the only thing we have in common is our passion for kind of this subject.
I agree.
Because on every other bullet point, we are different, but that's why it works.
Opposites attract.
And if I didn't have her, I actually don't know where it'd be. You talk about people coming into your life at the right time, and one of the people is my sponsor who grew up in Attleboro. And she's from Attleboro. I'm from North Attleboro. We don't usually like each other, but
rivals.
Yeah,
Yes.
Two people from the town. I like Attleboro. I shouldn't say that. Saved my life, but I don't know. I don't know really where I went with that, but.
So, Chris, how old were you when you started using substances?
Well, I mean, like when it got out of control. Because growing up, I drank now and then in high school. Mm-hmm. I didn't do it much. I was so involved. I always had a fear of letting people down or a fear of failure that I didn't put myself in a ton of situations where I was going to miss practice or be hungover for practice. But I did. Mm-hmm. But looking back, the one thing I notice now, when I did put something in me and get out of myself, I never knew when to stop. But I compared myself to other people. I said, I'm only doing it once a month. But whenever I did drink, it got out of control really quick.
So it was like binge drinking.
Yes. And I never had a shut off with anything. But, you know, I drank now and then in high school, and same thing in the college. I probably at 5 years at Boston College. I graduated in 3.5 again into graduate school. I don't think I missed more than 3 classes in 5 years. And I probably went to 5 parties total.
Wow.
You know, and I always, you know, but I isolated for 5 years, and I did the right thing, and I hid in my room, and I didn't talk to people. I didn't get to know one regular student besides football players. You know, but I did drink in college here and there, you know, and same thing in my first few years in the NFL. I drank here and there, and I know for me personally, I always went through life kind of on a tightrope, and if nothing really happened, I was just going to get by. You know, and I had a few things happen when I signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I had a few injuries, and I had my first coach that didn't like me or used to call me out. And I know for me at the time, I couldn't handle that. Like, I got through life just being able to handle life, you know, and I never, like, turned to substances, or I didn't need to escape, you know. But at that point when I wasn't living up to the player I thought I should be, and I felt like I fell off that beam, and I didn't know any other outlet. Like, I come from a family that doesn't communicate at all, zero. You know, I didn't know you're supposed to talk to people. I didn't know there's people out there that want to help you. You know, in my family, you just keep everything in and don't talk about it, and it's not a problem. And for me, I found an outlet in alcohol at the time, you know, and that's kind of when it started. Around 2000, I was with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And how old were you at this point?
2073, so.
27.
Yeah.
So your late 20s.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's kind of where my journey began with, you know, with it started with alcohol for me.
So you were using alcohol to kind of quiet those voices in your head, quiet
Yes.
the demons that were haunting you.
It was literally the only thing that got me through the day when I was out there. Was the thought, I can't wait to get home, have a couple drinks, and then I can forget about it, quiet down my head and what I think about myself, and forget about for the day for a little while, because I didn't know a healthy alternative on how to deal with life or situations or anxiety or depression.
So when did that start to get out of hand?
In Pittsburgh, I mean, I started drinking every night. You know, I wasn't falling down but it was every night. You know, but in my head, I was controlling it. It wasn't a big deal. I'll never be an alcoholic. I'm not like that. You know, I'll stop whenever. And but yeah, it really started around 2000 in Pittsburgh, and then yeah, things got out of control pretty shortly after.
When did you start using heroin?
That was a couple years later.
And what prompted that?
I had started buying pain pills in 2001. I was released by the Steelers. I came back to Massachusetts, and I started to hang out with a new type of person. I started to hang around with people that only liked me because I played football and I had money. You know, and all the people that cared about my family, real friends, and I was ashamed that I got released, and I stopped hanging out with them. But I started buying pain pills right around 9/11, 2001.
And was that for pain, or was that
No,
for recreational use?
That was for recreational. I had surgeries before, but I was in no pain. You know, but I had structure in my life at the time. You know, and I know after the surgeries I threw them away. You know, but it was kind of like the perfect storm for me. My depression had gotten worse. My anxiety was through the roof. I started buying the pain pills in September 2001, and it still scares me because I can still almost picture the night. But I remember taking the Percocet, Vicodin, and I remember the feeling. Like it was the feeling that I had dreamt about in my head since I was in like 3rd grade. You know, like I always dreamt growing up of feeling a certain way. Like I knew how I felt wasn't right. You know, my doubts and anxiety and all the fears I had, you know, and I just wanted to be comfortable for a little while. I just wanted to be comfortable around people, and I found it in those pain pills. And looking back, it was over at the time. I just didn't know it, you know. But, you know, yeah, so it was around September 2001 I started buying pain pills. But it was about 8 or 9 months later that I eventually found heroin, you know, through someone else in my life.
And then your journey to sobriety began after how many years of using these types of drugs?
Yeah, I started in '01, so '08, 7 years, maybe 8, 2000, I really started drinking. So it was a long 7 or 8 years of a lot of damage to especially myself and the people around me. You know, it's fun. One of the biggest things we talk about is, we didn't know it, the ripple effect of like our decisions or a kid's decisions or Taylor's decisions. Like you just, at the time you're going through something, you're like, I'm only hurting myself, just leave me alone. Like,
Right.
It's not a big deal. You don't realize the damage you're doing to the people around you, your friends, relatives, nieces. You know, it's pretty amazing. But yeah, so December 15th, 2008, so I'm coming up on my 14 years.
14 years.
What was
Yeah,
that?
and it took a lot of,
So
I
good.
went to, you know, I can't go through the 8 years, but I got down, by '05, I was 165 pounds, down
Wow.
from 290, and all this stuff, and I ended up in hospitals. But from 2005, 2008, I went to 50 in rehabs. And I can remember growing up in college and high school thinking, like, how could someone do that to their lives? And I honestly believed that. Like, I thought because I could deal with physical pain and I could deal with injuries and I could push myself, that like somehow this won't affect me. You know, the thing for me is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life wasn't anything I did in sports, was getting sober. You know, and I really wish when I was a kid that I realized this harmless pain pill that the trainers used to give me after games, I didn't know where it could lead.
Right.
You know, after the game, you're hurt, here's a couple pain pills, and the pain goes away. And I didn't realize that could eventually lead to heroin.
Right.
You know, and for me, it was a lot of detoxes. And
So what
I
was that
did.
final kind of inciting incident that inspired you to commit to your sobriety?
Yeah. So for me is, I had left another sober house, and I remember thinking, I had lost my house. I was in North Attleboro, an apartment that I couldn't afford, and I had no cable or heat. And I remember thinking, I can't do this. Like, I thought my life was going to be that cycle of relapse and hospitals and letting people down. And because I just didn't have, like, I wanted to get clean, I just couldn't do it, you know. And but the day, December 15th, so my day of my sobriety, the thing I had struggled with my whole life, my mental health, I had a total breakdown. I wasn't in a police station or in court or in another ambulance or, you know, whatever, all the things you think would be your jackpots throughout the years of addiction. It was the thing I had struggled with forever, my mental health, my anxiety and depression. I had a total mental breakdown. And I cried for probably 5 hours on my couch. I was shaking. I tried to get in the church next door, but it was locked because I was like, I got to pray or something. And but the one thing that happened that day is, like, I finally reached a point where I said to myself after 36 years, like, I can't feel this anymore. I don't know, the gift of desperation and I don't know, but the one thing that happened is that guy Steve walked in about 15 minutes later, and he was coming by my house like 3 times a day. I had called him weeks before. I don't remember doing it because I wasn't sober. You know, and he kept coming by, but he came in about 15 minutes after I had that total breakdown, and this is the truth. I was 36. First time in my life I asked another human being for help with anything.
Yep.
First time I ever went to anybody for anything. You know, and geez, like I tell the kids, don't wait. You know what I mean? Like, there's help out. People want to help. There's so many good people in this world. You just got to find the right person, someone you trust, someone you can rely on, and people want to. And that first time I asked for help changed my life.
Right.
You know, has me here.
Right.
So.
Well, an amazing journey for sure.
Yeah.
And now you have a message that you can share. So both of you have spent years educating kids, parents, and others about the harmfulness and risks associated with underage substance use. Kathi, I've heard you say that you were a rite of passage mom.
Absolutely.
Before losing Taylor, and now you are insistent that 21 is 21 for a reason. Could you tell us about that journey and why that's so important to you?
Absolutely. I was that rite of passage mom. So you have to remember when Taylor was 17, I also had a 19-year-old son, Zachary, and a younger son who was 10, Logan. So I was a single mom at the time, and I was that mom that used to purchase alcohol for my 19-year-old. So when I was 18, I was married, having babies. So for me, that 19 felt like an adult to me. And I did not have the understanding why 21 was the number. So after Taylor passed away, my world obviously changed immediately, and my perspective of underage drinking changed. And I will never forget, a few weeks after Taylor had passed, it was probably a month, my oldest son, Zachary, came up to me and he said, "Mom, will you buy me some beer?" And I remember thinking, I looked at that boy and I said, "Are you insane? What are you thinking? That is a humongous mistake I made. I'll never do that again." And I will tell you, 14 years later, I have never done that again. I learned the highest lesson at the most expensive cost. So for me, 21 is 21. And the reason why I so believe that now is because I'm a lot more educated in what alcohol does to a system for a young person. I'm more educated in the dangers. I'm more educated in what has happened. I have so many friends now that have lost their kids either from substances or underage drinking that I know it is real. I know the reasons why. And, I think the price came at a very high price for me, and my goal is that it's not going to happen to other families because of that. And I will say ignorance, because it was ignorance that I did not know. I mean, a lot of people say, yes, 21's 21, but they don't realize the dynamics behind it and why that is the actual age, with a human brain. And I'm by no means a doctor, nor do I pretend to be one on TV or a podcast. But you learn the dangers of it, so that has changed my world entirely.
So there's a saying that you don't know what you don't know. To touch on what you just said.
I actually have that tattooed on my arm.
Oh, no
when
kidding.
You know better, you do better. Yes, from Maya Angelou. Yes, yeah, no, it's tattooed right on my arm. I believe in it that well. Yes, so when you know better, you do better. And I am a living example of that. If you go on our website, Sullivan's Message, that is literally my quote. So
that's funny. I didn't know that.
Yes, I truly, truly believe in that. Because honestly, I was a good mom prior to Taylor passing. I had the basic knowledge of, what was right and what was wrong. But I will share with you, I was a much better mom for Logan than I ever was with Zachary and Taylor. And he had a different mom. He had a totally different mom, Logan, my 10-year-old, teaching him the right ways and being a good example for him. Right. And, I was the mom that didn't have the alcohol in my house because I never drank at home. It was not something I ever did. If I did drink, it was out socially. So it wasn't anything like my kids were surrounded by alcohol all the time at my household. But I will share with you, when I cleaned out Taylor's room afterwards, there was beer in her closet. And I was blown away by that. It was like, I think the more I learned, the more I realized what I was lacking in, as a parent. So that's why I do the parent nights, to try to get better educated, parents out there.
In terms of your own personal knowledge and understanding.
Exactly.
So
yes.
Now you have that knowledge, you have that information, and your goal is to share that with other parents to make sure that they're not making similar mistakes.
Poor choices, exactly.
Poor choices.
And honestly, I will share with you, I don't have a problem with drinking. I stopped drinking entirely when I met Chris because it just wasn't important to me. But we do not have a problem with people who drink healthy, could drink under control. My concern is 21 is 21 for a reason, So I think the education that we put behind it is to just educate your kids and the parents as well.
So in addition to 21 being 21 for a reason, what are some of the other salient points that you would like every parent to know?
Yes. No, it's funny. You gave us a list before we got here, so yes. I actually have them in front of me. And it's funny because you said, what are the good points? I think one of my most important points is that your child is no different than my child. And your kids are faced with stuff every single day. I don't know if parents, if we grasp that concept as well as we should. our kids growing up today grow up totally different than us. With social media and what's available to them, it's a totally different world. And Chris will share too, like, conversations are huge. I think the most important thing people can get out of this is to be able to have conversations with your kids about everything and live by example as well, because they do watch what you do. Chris was talking about how important conversation is, right?
And
You had said
informed
that.
conversation.
Informed,
Yes.
yes.
Well,
Yep.
especially with me too, especially when I talked about it's communication. Like, I could have gone to my parents, but I didn't know. Like, I was so, everything with them was like kind of, was disciplined. The communication I got was when I did something wrong and I got yelled at, but there was zero, like, I didn't see, my family doesn't communicate. Like, I didn't know I could have gone to my mother or father, and my wife got me on a TV show.
Mel Robbins.
Mel
love her.
Robbins, couple years ago.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, she wrote into the show being me, because she loves the lady. And,
He's very interesting.
and I went on the show, but the sad part of that is, I was going somewhere with this story, is my mother saw it. And my mother actually passed away on my sobriety date 2 years ago.
Wow.
I knew she'd pick that day anyway. It's my sister's wedding anniversary, too. But the thing about that is I went on the show, my mother watched it. I walked into my mother's house for a Sunday dinner, and she lost it. She started crying. And she said, I had no idea you were struggling that much. And I remember telling her, like, how would you?
Right.
Like, I portrayed someone that had everything going on for him. And I never communicated, and especially with me, like, I think if someone really asked me if I was struggling with something, I probably would have opened up, but nowhere did anyone think I was struggling with something.
And it never occurred to you to reach out to somebody
No,
else?
no, geez. I mean, I had a lot of certain mold of football coach, and I had Coughlin and Parcells and Belichick, and it's like, I'd never go to like someone like that and say, or someone in my family, I'm struggling with like anxiety and depression. I was too scared to.
Were you concerned about your career?
I was not so much my career, just kind of my image. I didn't want, like, I felt so insecure and fearful, and like I didn't want people to see me that way. Like, I didn't want people to think I was weak or not a strong person, or, I didn't want, like, I want to portray a different image of myself.
Right.
And honestly, Kristen, that's what so many of the students come up and speak to him about immediately afterwards. It's amazing.
About having those same feelings, you mean?
Well, yeah, and that's the kind of funny thing about that is, like, she hugs 200 kids.
At least.
And I get the kids like me, and I can pick them out from a mile away, and they come up, and they're not sure if they're going to say hi, and they're pacing around, then they walk away, and that's who comes up and speaks to me after.
But they say they feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like they can't, let people know what they really are feeling inside.
No, and I get a lot of parents that, like, oh my God, my kid's you. And like I said, 90% of that's great, but pay attention to the other 10%.
Right.
That he may be struggling. Everything's not as good as it looks.
Right.
And
You can't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And kids are very good at pretending and
Yes.
suppressing. So we just talked about things that you'd like every parent to know. What are some things that you'd like every kid to know? If you had to encapsulate your speech into a couple of talking points, what would those be?
Yeah. It's funny. I think with our speech, and obviously it's about substance use and underage drinking. That is the main criteria why we go to the communities we go to. But at the end of the conversation, it is always about choices. It literally comes down to choices on every aspect of your life. Your friendships, your choices, what you do, what you take in your system. Like, just choices in general are what causes the good outcomes. And I always tell kids, when you have that gut feeling that something's not right, it's not right. Go by your gut. You're never going to stay yourself wrong. So I think kids need to realize that, if they are going to choose to drink for the evening, or they're going to choose to use some sort of substances, they're giving away the outcome of being able to have a successful life. Because as much as we like to think our friends are going to take care of us, just like Taylor did that night, she was surrounded by 22 of her friends, but they were also making poor choices, and they were all 17 and 18-year-old brains, that couldn't possibly have protected themselves.
Right.
So I think I get so many emails from kids who have been in the same circumstances, who have literally been in the woods drunk, and their friends have left them behind, or I had one girl come up to me a couple weeks ago when we were doing a parent night. There was one girl, and I noticed the crowd. Like Chris said, I hug them all. He hides in the back, but I'm out front greeting everybody when they come in. And most parent nights are quiet. There's not a lot of people that typically go to a community parent night, unfortunately. So my message to everybody listening is go to those events, please. But more
It's one of the reasons
yeah.
why we've pivoted to a podcast, so that it's in on-demand format, so people can listen and hear these
Exactly.
important messages in the comfort of their own home or at their
Absolutely.
convenience.
That's very
So,
smart, because it is difficult to get out night times. But we were at this, where were we? What town were we in? I'm trying to remember, it was 2 weeks ago. We're so bad with towns. But we were in this town, and there was like 45, 50 people there, which is a lot for a nighttime event. But this one girl had come in, and she was way at the top of the bleachers. And at the end of the talk, she came down, and she was talking to me, and she gave me a hug, and she's like, thank you so much. You have no idea how important that was to me. And then she left. And then after everybody left, she came back, and she was hysterically crying. And I was like, honey, what's the matter? She goes, that happened to me last week. She goes, I was out in the woods. My friends all left. I was alone. I was asleep in the woods because I had passed out.
Wow.
She goes, but one of my friends realized that I had never come home. They went, knocked on the door, got my parents up, and they came and they looked for her. So, as I'm going to get upset here, but that girl was like, I literally could have been Taylor, and she's like, I'm so thankful I wasn't. I'm like, I am so thankful you weren't, and I'm even more thankful that your mother forced you to come listen to this message tonight, right? She goes, yeah, and she had emailed me afterwards. And she said, I'm not letting my mother know how important this was to me, because she'll have that ha-ha, I'm right moment. And I said to her, oh, you got to tell your mother she was right. So she ended up talking to her mom that night, and her mom emailed me like the next day and said, listen, my daughter said she spoke to you. Thank you so much. I'm very blessed she made it. And those are the stories that I love to hear, because it's friends that were taking care of her. It's people that knew, come up and admit your stupid mistakes. Who cares? We're human. We're going to make mistakes. And just the fact that you can learn from a message is huge. And she said, you have changed my entire life and my entire perspective forever. And that's what it's all about. It's like amazing what can happen,
Right.
and even just that parent, being so thankful, that the kids did the right thing, and adults don't do the right thing. So we all have to work on ourselves a little bit, But that's why we do what we do, because it's those moments when you can have that person forced to come to a presentation and then embrace it afterwards. It's just amazing.
Well, it must have been very powerful for that mom to know that her daughter was able to communicate with somebody else. To your point about communication and finding someone that you trust that you can talk to when you're having a challenging time. So for her daughter to know that she could have those conversations with you,
Yes.
even if she didn't maybe feel necessarily comfortable talking to her parents about it.
Yep.
So I think it's important. That's one of the things that we want kids to understand, is that even if those critical people in your lives are not the people that you would necessarily turn to when you're having a tough time, there are others out there who care about you.
There is someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we always say that. We always say, whoever it is, just talk to whoever you can talk to. We don't care who it is,
Right.
And it can even be, another person their age, if it is that person, but just reach out to somebody.
Well, it's hard to go to the people closest to you. I know that for people in recovery, it's like those are the people you give the most backlash to, because what they say gets through and it hurts you. So it's like my sponsor's the person, I didn't know him from Adam, I opened up to. He's the one I asked for help. I think a lot of times if you're a kid and your parents come to talk to you, you don't want to let them down. You don't want to tell them all this stuff, you need to find someone.
You do.
Everyone needs someone in this world to talk to. And I turn to dogs most of the time.
And me.
We got 5 dogs. My dogs and my wife.
Yes, dogs
Without
and your
that,
wife.
I'd be
In
in
that
trouble.
order, people.
But the scary part for us is when we started doing this 14 years ago, like Taylor's story, front page, we never realized the scope until we started going town to town, state to state. Like, it doesn't just happen here, it happens in every town, every community. But it's changed so much with fentanyl. It's like you're losing a whole generation of people, and
Right.
it's not in the paper, and it's just a blurb on a computer screen, and it's just, it really is scary.
Well, it's an issue, once you start talking with people about this topic, you realize that it's an issue that touches everyone,
Yes.
whether it touches them personally, or a family member, a child, a friend. So nobody's untouched
No.
by this topic.
No, and it's not, you can't recreational use anymore, because this fentanyl is getting cross-contaminating everything.
many
And
risks.
kids are going out to, I'm going to smoke a joint, and it's laced with fentanyl, and that's it. And
Right.
we've heard a
They're
lot
done.
of stories like that. It's really a scary,
It's
Right.
very scary.
glad I'm not a kid now, but
Yeah.
Well, we know that effective prevention measures include parents and other adults modeling good behavior. We've kind of touched on that already. Have you heard from any parents in particular who've either said that they've changed their habits or changed their perspective or changed their behavior as a result of hearing your stories?
Many, 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 many parents, and it's beautiful because that's the whole point of this. I have parents now who check on their kids more often, who have phone numbers, who talk to them about substances. One perfect example is I actually have one of the kids who supplied the alcohol for Taylor. He was a 21-year-old boy, and he was the one that supplied some of the alcohol for Taylor that night. His family are family friends of mine. And when all of this came down, we realized that it was this family member of ours. And we ended up, not really talking for a few years. We were not angry with each other, but we didn't speak with each other for a few years. And years later, I was at the nail salon getting my feet done with my girlfriend. And when I was in that chair, in that pedicure chair, my friend was to the right of me, but then to the right of her was Sean's mom. And Sean's mom and I speak now. We always had, but we stopped for a few years. But she was there, and I had not seen her for years. And I was the younger kid, so like the family members were older, so like Marion and whatnot was older, so I didn't hang out with them per se. But her mother-in-law and my aunt were best friends side by side next door. So we've always known the family. So afterwards, I realized that it was Sean's mom that was sitting there. And I remember thinking, oh God, what am I going to do? Because I've always wanted to talk to her afterwards. So I finished up, she finished up. I walked over to her after she was done, and I said, sweetie, I just want to say, I'm so sorry your family went through what they went through. And she said, Kathi, I'm so sorry that your family went through what you went through. Because I was the mom sitting there with the loss of the child, but they were also the parents with the poor child that was 21 that had supplied the alcohol.
It's that ripple effect
It is
we were
that ripple
talking
effect,
about.
exactly. So, she was living down the street 2 miles, living her nightmare from the subsequent consequences from the, passing of Taylor. And I was up the street living my nightmare. And I remember saying to her, I'm so sorry. And she goes, you know what, Kathi, I'm so sorry you went through what you went through, and myself as well. She said, but it amazes me how things don't change. She said, I changed my behavior afterwards. There was never alcohol in the house. If we ever had people in the house, we were so aware of everything. She goes, but I would go places, and my friends hadn't changed their behaviors, even though they knew what I was going through.
Right.
And when she said that to me, I realized her pain more so at that point, because you go through your own stuff and you think of your side, but you don't necessarily always realize what other people are going through. And she went through some major life changings with her son. Her son struggled for years because he wasn't able to forgive himself. And I had forgiven him day one because he always took responsibility for it. But the quick story is, he was actually at a meeting with Chris, and he was chairing the meeting.
No kidding.
Yes, cheering with Taylor.
NA.
You know, he was at an NA meeting, right, because he had struggled for years.
Wow.
And as Chris listened, he called me and he said, hey, he's up there sharing, should I leave? And I said, no, please tell him I'm so proud of him, you know. And afterwards, I was texting him, he was texting me. You know, he came over and had dinner at my house on Taylor's anniversary. You know, we all make mistakes. We all can make poor choices. But I always tried to share with him that everything good that has happened because of Taylor's story involves him. There are kids not buying alcohol for young kids because of that part of the story. There are kids making better choices. There are 21-year-olds making better choices. And I said to him, you know what, you have to realize that you are also a part of all the good that happened.
So
And
a positive ripple
yes,
effect.
a positive ripple effect, you know, because I said, you know, if it wasn't the whole entire story, that wouldn't have stopped people from buying alcohol for someone younger. So anything good that has happened because of Taylor is also because of you, honey. You know, and he's doing really good now. You know, life is really well. So, you know, but it's always, you always think your decisions only affect you. And it's such a ripple effect, you know,
Well,
so
I've-
parents change all the time.
I've heard
Yeah.
your story and a couple of times. We did the Take 10 video when I
Yes.
interviewed you, and then I heard you present to the kids at Hingham High School. And in one of those conversations, I don't remember which one, you talk about a mom who was at the homecoming game and saw Taylor. So
Yes.
as we're on the subject of this ripple effect and people being involved and people regretting, and there's nothing worse than regret,
Yeah.
and knowing that you could have potentially changed things. Could you share a little bit about what this mom has said to you?
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny, since I've talked to you, that dynamic has even changed. So the story she's talking about is when Taylor was at the homecoming game that night. Taylor went up and sat next to one of her softball friend moms. And she sat up next to this lady and she was talking to Taylor. And, you know, Taylor was very loud like her mother. She was very, very, very great personality. She was amazing. But she walked up and she was chatting away. And this mom could tell that she had been drinking and that she had asked Taylor if she was driving. And when Taylor said she wasn't driving, she let her go. And then a couple weeks later, that poor woman had to sit on my couch and say that she wished she had called me. You know, and that's part of my message when I speak, is I try to have parents, you know, if you see something, say something, kind of like they say at the airport. You know, and I always say, you know, just be sure to say something, because at least then you know you've done your part, because we don't know what would have happened. You know, things may not have changed. You know, I forgave that woman on the spot because you can't get those moments back, you know.
Right.
But what ended up happening for years, we didn't really speak because of that, because she realized I was sharing that on my conversations. And I was like, I've never said your name, I just want it to be educational. It's all about education, you know, someone making a better choice. And we actually had a conversation within the last year. I invited her to my office, and I just wanted to talk to her about it because we had never had that conversation. And sometimes conversations can be very challenging, you know, but you feel like you have to say something from your heart just to get it out. And we actually spoke. And you know what? She's a very good friend of mine now. We're back on Facebook together. We, you know, comment on each other. She loved my kid, just like I loved her kid, you know, and it was just a poor decision for the evening. And, you know, the fact that people can learn from that is huge, you know. So the point of that conversation is, you know, if you see something, make that phone call. But you also have to make sure that if you have young kids on here listening, that you want to tell your kids' friends, parents, that you want the phone conversation, because
Right.
we need to be able to say, hey, call us if something's up. Because so many people are afraid, you know, to be that, as I say, tattletale parent.
Right.
You know, trust me, you want to do it, because, you know, the repercussions can be very severe. So I'm very glad to sit here and say that we've had that conversation one-on-one, face-to-face, and it was good to be able to get everything out in the air, and it ended up working out well.
That's great.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we hear from parents a lot is, you know, we don't want our kids to be drinking or to be around substances, but we don't feel comfortable letting other parents know that necessarily. We don't want to be the social outcasts. We don't want our kids to be the social outcasts. And one of the things that we like to do at Hingham Cares is to provide those parents the cover that they need to have those difficult conversations with parents, because you want, with other parents, you want to be preemptive in this world.
Absolutely.
You want to make sure that you are getting ahead of what could potentially become a terrible, tragic situation. And there's nothing wrong with teaching your kids to say no, to saying no to other parents, to saying no to other kids. So that's a really important lesson. And unfortunately, from your story, we hear what the negative outcome is from not having those important conversations with other parents.
But we're not hearing all the positive conversations that are actually happening because they're actually doing something about it.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that, because with Logan, I parented entirely different, And, we also have to be okay with our kids making mistakes. Hello, they're going to make mistakes. And when you can freely have a conversation with them about it, or even with your friend about it, then it makes it okay that the kids are going to be able to come to the table with something if they've messed up.
Right.
My son Logan, trust me, he lost his sister when he was 10 years old. Was his perspective about underage drinking different? Yes. But did he? Yes. Did I find him smoking pot when he was, in the sophomore high school? Yes. Did we have those conversations? Yes, we did. But I think parents can't be afraid of, whatever choices are being made at their household and bringing them to the table, because when you actually speak about them, they're not so terrible,
Right. And one of the important things that parents can teach their kids is refusal skills.
Yes.
So when they find themselves in a challenging situation where drugs and alcohol are in the vicinity and other kids are using, teaching them how to say no, teaching them how to get out of those situations effectively. So do you have any tips for parents and kids with regard to refusal skills?
No, it's funny. They always say, have the code word for the kid. If they call and say something, you'll come and get them. And I think that's great. But our kids are faced with something almost every single weekend. There's just no way they're not nowadays. And I think the refusal skills, I think letting them know that living a clean and healthy lifestyle. And I love the fact that there's such healthy kids nowadays, that if you really look at a high school, how many kids are drinking? It's not as much as everybody thinks it is. How many are using substances? It's really not. So they have to realize that the lack of use is normal as well.
Right.
Which, people come over to Chris and my house for dinner, or a cookout. We don't have alcohol at our house, we don't mind if people bring it over if they're going to have a drink or something, but it's not expected. I'm having a baby shower. I'm having a grandson.
Oh,
super excited. Yeah, I'm not allowed to put it on Facebook. I might as well say it on a public podcast, right? Yes. But I'm having my new grandson, and we're having a baby shower, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have to serve alcohol at a baby shower. That's stupid, But it's funny because it becomes your norm. So just as an adult would think that, what is the kid thinking?
Right.
It's true. Yeah. So they just need skills. You've got to be able to stand up for yourself and what you believe in, and know that it's
feel
normal.
comfortable doing
Right.
that. Yes.
Yep. I think parents can do that too. You always talk about, how people in your meetings will say, I couldn't wait. What do they say?
Well, yeah, a lot of times you hear how kids couldn't wait till they were 21 so they could drink like their parents drank. And that was their only, so that's how their parents dealt with stress. So that's how they're supposed to deal with stress. And a lot of people that struggled and ended up becoming alcoholics and addicts, they followed in their parents' footsteps because that's what they were being shown, how to deal with life and how to deal with certain things, was to turn to a bottle, not the healthy side of it. And that's one of the things we really try to stress is just, you can drink in front of your kids and all that stuff, but just really pay attention to what you're portraying, because you don't realize, even in my own situation, I became my father, you know what I mean? And it's in 99% of that's great. The 1%'s bad. I have zero communication too.
He's not an alcoholic, but you became the communication portion.
It's just you really, especially adults, be careful what you're showing your kids.
Well, they say that a parent is a child's first role model.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're looking up to you, they're paying attention to everything that you say, everything that you do, even when you don't think they are.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I will share with you, I was a much better role model with Logan than I ever was with Zachary Taylor. I was not a horrible role model before, but when I look back, there's so many things I could have been doing different, which
You
I did.
made better choices.
Right, made better choices, exactly.
So on the subject of working with parents and providing support to parents, a few years ago you started a support group for parents called Moving Forward.
Yes.
Could you describe that?
Absolutely. It's called Moving Forward Parents, and we meet every Tuesday night via Zoom. And it's for all parents, mostly moms. Sorry, guys, but we can have some dads, but it's mostly moms for some reason. We had a couple of guys. And it's really a parent figure. It's just somebody who has lost a child. And I will share with you that I have probably at least 10 that regularly jump on this meeting Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. And we talk about everything. And it's really nice because there's people who have lost kids from substance use. There's people who have lost kids from accidents, cancer, stillbirths, you name it, it's a loss is a loss. But we have conversations every single Tuesday about whatever our week has been. We have deep conversations. And honestly, I will share with you right after Taylor passed, I remember being at my sister's house, and she was getting my hair done. She's my hairdresser, like I mentioned earlier. But she was doing my hair when I was trying to get ready for Taylor's funeral. And I remember looking in the mirror and seeing that mom who had lost a kid. And I remember seeing that saddened face on me with no emotion. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to be able to survive this. Like, I looked at that woman in that mirror and I said, I can't be her, because Kristen, as you know, I'm the most joyous human being you'll ever meet in your life. It's just who I am. And somehow I didn't become that person. Somehow I was able to survive it and be able to move forward. And that's literally what we do. We don't get over the loss of your child ever. You don't get over the loss of your person ever, no matter who it may be. But you have to learn to move forward. I always say we bring them with us. And I always explain to people, you may have physically lost that person, but that physical side of Taylor, like I said this the other day for the first time, I loved her butt, but I didn't love her butt. I loved her hugs, but it wasn't her hug that I loved. It was always the soul behind the hug.
Right.
It was always the person. And we never lose that person if you really, really don't want to lose that person. So we move forward in our meetings. Amazing thing. So Chris works at Gilly's house. It's a sober house in Wentham for men. And Barbara, who lost her son, started that how many years ago? 6 years ago now?
Roughly.
Yeah, so she lost her son about 7 years ago. And she started this 21-bed sober house, which is so supported in Wentham. It's beautiful. But she started doing a luncheon 3 years ago. And she had asked me if I would go to it 3 years ago. And I said, oh, my God, I'd love to. And she said, good, because you're speaking. And I'm like, what? How is that an invitation? So we had 25 people. It was right during COVID. And we could only have 25 people because everybody had to stay away from each other. But that year, we did the first one. The second one, we had over like 120 parents who had lost their kids.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And the conversations were amazing. And we're actually having our third one on Monday. And we brought it down to 80 because 120 was a little too much. But we brought it down to 80. And there will be 80 parents there that have lost a child. And whatever that loss is from, the feelings are still the same.
Right.
So that's what we're there for, to support each other. So it's the most beautiful thing, because I always say to people, when I just did the SAD-OD did a big grief conference in October a couple weeks ago, and we spoke there, and there was like 200 people there. And you don't get a chance to talk about your human, and also just talk about your human. It doesn't have to be the sad part of it. It can just be the happy part of it. But a lot of people look at people who've lost kids and can't even have a conversation with them.
Right.
My first thing is always, when they can't speak to me, I'm always like, what was your kid's name? And then they say it and they light up and they just start talking. And that's what this is all about. So, if anybody needs the support out there, we would love to have them. Tuesday night, 7 p.m., go on the site and click on. And I let people know, some people can't talk. Some people can't show their face. Get on without your video. Get on there and mute it. Just listen to the conversation. And you'll realize that you are not alone. And that's what it's all about.
And they can go to your website and find that information.
Yes,
It's
yes.
sullivansmessage.com.
Yes. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing what happens.
That's amazing.
Yep, never alone. Even, people struggling in substance use disorder, you're not alone, and that's what we need to know.
Absolutely.
Yep.
When you and I spoke last year for the Take 10 video, when I interviewed you for that, you told a story of another mom who had lost her children, 2 sons in one night.
Yes.
And that story has stuck with me. Any story of loss, it's just terrible. And as a parent, you feel for other parents. Yeah. But that story in particular stuck with me because of the magnitude of the tragedy and how young the kids were.
Yeah.
and how preventable the situation was. All of this
Absolutely.
loss due to substances is 100% preventable.
Absolutely.
What were the details of that story?
So that is my friend Becky Savage,
She
and
in town
she is flying in on Sunday. She's actually coming to our luncheon. So if you want to meet her, come on Monday and
very
visit.
nice. Okay.
But she is coming on Monday. She's flying in from Indiana, and her foundation she created is the 525 Foundation. In 2015, she lost her son, Jack and Nick. They were 18 and 19. One had just graduated from high school, and the other one had just come home from his freshman year. And she is the most amazing woman. And ironically, I had seen her on Facebook or the news or somewhere at one point, early on, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And then we went to a fundraiser for Kevin Stevens. He's a hockey player who is in recovery. And we went to his fundraiser, and I met this woman. She was introduced to me, and she said, "Oh, this is Becky, and she's with the 525 Foundation." And I looked at her, and I said, "Did you lose 2 of your sons on the same night in your house?" She said, "Yes." And I had literally just heard about that woman the week before, so I know our kids were up there working the magic, no, without a doubt. So we've been friends ever since, and she does a lot in Indiana. She does the same with us with speaking at schools, but she also does a lot with the DEA. So she does a lot about drug take-backs, because her sons, it was graduation, couple of parties, during the day. Both of them came home before curfew. One went downstairs with a couple of friends, and the other one went up to bed to go to sleep. And she woke up in the morning, and she's a nurse, and she woke up in the morning and walked into one of her son's room upstairs and noticed he was unresponsive. And she started working on him with CPR. And as she did, the ambulance pulled into a driveway because the kids downstairs had noticed that the other son was not breathing. And she lost both her boys that one day in her house. And when I met that woman, I thought, how do you survive that? Everybody has their thing, but how do you survive that? And she is absolutely amazing. Her and her husband, she still has the 2 boys, so she has 4 boys total, but she's got 2 younger kids, and she does amazing things, and she's actually flying out to talk at our mom's breakfast, so we're going to have some good time. But she's amazing what she does. But it's all about education, it's all about awareness, and the things that she does with her foundation are absolutely amazing. So if anybody has a chance to check her out, I know she's 525foundation.org, I believe.
Well,
Yeah.
it raises such an important issue, too. So many people think, like your friend, oh, well, Taylor's not driving, so it's okay that she's drinking.
Right.
And what people don't understand is that any form of underage substance use can cause any number of complications. So these 2 young men
Yes.
went out and partied,
They literally
came home before curfew.
Right, before curfew, did what they were supposed to do, and they came, and it was acute alcohol poisoning and 1 oxycodone pill.
Wow.
And unfortunately, during that night, there was someone handing the bottle out,
Yeah,
and
it
there
was
was
a prescription
there
from
was a prescription
someone's
from
medicine
somebody.
cabinet.
Yep.
Ah.
And they actually had 3 overdoses that night. 2 other people, I think I'm saying this correctly, had gone to the hospital, but nobody called everybody else to say, make sure you keep an eye on yourselves.
It's
You
that
know,
it's
so
that brain development that's just not there yet.
Nope, not at all.
They make risky decisions, they do risky things, and they're not thinking clearly enough, for one thing, under substances, but also because of the brain development, they're not thinking clearly enough to make those rational and right choices.
Yes, yeah, so.
Well, Kathi, our listeners can't see this, and I actually can't either, but I know it's there. It's under your sleeve.
Oh, what is it? Oh, my tattoo.
Your
Yes,
tattoo, you have a
yes.
tattoo of Taylor on
My
your
little
arm.
Taylor, yes.
That's very special to you for obvious
Yes.
reasons. She's
Yes.
a beautiful,
Eyes.
beautiful
You can see her
girl.
eyes. I've got a long sleeve shirt on today, people. But I put her there, as I say to the students at the end of my talk. I put her there so I could see her every single day, and she faces me. And I let the kids know that we're talking to, your parents or your loved one are there every single day.
Right.
And they honestly have no idea how important they are to their people. I know you're going to end with the last question, what is the most important message you could try to get out there, right? Is that what you're coming to next? If I
Well,
remember
the next
correctly?
question that I
Yes.
have, and
Yeah.
I'll see if I can get it out
Yes.
without crying,
Go
is if Taylor knew about the legacy that she's created through you spreading your message, through her message, what do you think she would have to say about that?
Well, first off, I'm going to tell you, I know she knows about the message, so it's not an if for me, and that has helped me a lot with my survival. I know that without a fact. without a doubt, not without a fact. What was that expression? I always make up my own words. Chris says, you really did. Hey.
I'm sorry.
But I know that she would be very proud. You know what's funny? I know that she would be happy with the changes that everybody has made. She is in the hearts of people that have never met her. She is literally on the arms because of the bracelets that say I'm here for a reason, so they have an affirmation, walking around places that I have no idea. And a very quick story with that is I had spoken at BC High School years and years ago. And it's an all-boys school for people that don't know that. Where is it? Is it in, it's in Boston?
Yes.
Yeah, so I got a phone call from a principal a couple of years ago. And the principal forwarded me a message. And he had received a message from one of his prior students who had been out of school for 4 years. So he was, 22 years old? And he had left him a voicemail. And the voicemail basically said, hi, this is JC. There was a mom who came to my school when I was a senior 4 years ago. I have been wearing that bracelet that says somebody loves me, 'cause that's what they used to say, that says I'm here for a reason, whatever, which one it was. He goes, but I have had that bracelet on for 4 years, and it just broke, and I don't have it, and I need to get it back. It's like a piece of me. He goes, please, can you tell me where she is so I can try to get another bracelet? I feel like it's a piece of me, and I need this bracelet.
He was at Boston College at the time.
He was at Boston College. So I ended up calling him because it had his phone number, so I didn't even call the principal back. I called the kid directly. His name was JC. And I called him and I said, hey, this is Taylor's mom. I heard you're looking for some bracelets. And he's like, yes, I would love to have some. I said, okay, where do you live? And he gave me his address, and Chris came with me. And we ended up sitting in his living room with a pile of bracelets and some other stuff from Taylor. And as we sat there, and his mom was there, we ended up realizing, first off, how sweet is that this young man, needs to have a bracelet that, says I'm important. It ended up being someone, ironically, his uncle worked with Chris side by side, and nobody knew this when we got there. It was absolutely amazing. So I always say that Taylor knows. Taylor gets us exactly where we're supposed to be and whoever we're supposed to be in front of. So I know she's up there smiling. I know she's very proud, And I look at it like she could be a 31-year-old today. She could be married. She could be having some grandbabies for me like my son. She could have some fabulous job right now. But that was not the path she was supposed to take. Right. And as the mom, to be able to say that I wouldn't change it, that's huge. So, whatever people may be listening to this and haven't had gone through something, please know that it's going to be okay. And please know that whatever they're going through, that there can be a reason and a purpose. And it doesn't have to be something grand scale, like you go to schools and hug 100 kids a day. It can be something as simple as you just have a conversation with somebody about your person. And that's truly all it needs to be about.
Right.
Yep. But I'll take my JC every day. He was amazing. That was the best story.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here with us today. This has been a great conversation. You've had so many important things to share, insight coming from the perspective that you both individually come from and then together, as in your partnership together. And I was just wondering if you had any final parting words for our listening audience.
I never do.
Yes, you do.
No.
He always says,
Final
I never know how to
words.
end. No, we were saying, that it's not just the disease. It's all about the choices is what we were talking about. Because we were talking on the way up here,
Right.
We're like, we never end well. What do you want to end with? And you were saying that it wasn't the disease. It was more about poor choices as well, and everything. And just talk to your people.
Right.
So, it's just as, a podcast is all about a conversation. Go home and have the same conversation with your people.
Well, you know what was just popped in my head too? And so my sponsor, Steve's best friend is Tom.
I love this story.
And it's like, all she can do is the best she can do as a parent, truthfully. Steve has been sober now 35 years. Tom has been sober now 34 years. Their sons are best friends. Neither kid ever saw alcohol in the house, never saw their parents drink. They both went to the same school. They were both best friends. Steve's kid's 35 now, has never had a drink. Tom's kid became a alcoholic and addict. you know, and they were raised the same by basically the exactly same person.
Wow.
You know, and really at the end of the day, it's situations, where you put yourself, and you know, I know with me, you know, when you look back at your life, you're like, it's kind of like fate, you know, and you know, especially as a parent, you just got to do the best you can do. And
Why don't you share where Tom's son, who struggled, went? He is clean and sober now for decades.
He got
right.
sober when he was 18, so he got kicked out of North Attleboro High School and went to rehabs and had all sorts of problems. But you know, it's funny. The most amazing, like the best people I know in my life are in those meeting halls, and those are the same people that I kind of thought like I'm nothing like them. Like my wife gets jealous. Like she just wants to sit in meeting halls.
I want to go to a meeting.
And but no, that kid, Tom's kid is like, I don't know. He's running like a fire department now. He's like
But
a
talk
lieutenant.
about Finn.
Oh, Finn.
Yes, about how
I can't talk about.
you
Finn.
can talk about Finn. How Tom's son. How
Oh, I
Josh-
don't know. I
yes.
don't completely know that story. You're gonna have
Yes,
to
you
go.
do.
on
It was Josh became an EMT.
Yes.
So go ahead.
No, I don't know the rest of
Yes,
the
you do.
story.
Go.
I don't.
Yes, he does. He's
No, I
being shy.
don't.
Josh is
don't
Josh
know the
became
whole
an
story.
EMT, and our grandson from his ex-girlfriend's
Oh, I get it.
daughter's son. Now go.
No, you can finish.
Okay, no, but basically speaking, so one of our grandsons ended up choking, and he ended up being the EMT that came to our house to help our grandbaby breathe better. You know, so there is full circle. You know, like
Right.
someone whose son struggled, and there he is saving a baby's life.
Wow.
You know,
And,
Wow.
yeah, I believe you might have been Narcan too, so that's a
he
whole
was at the
different.
time exactly.
You know,
Yeah, Josh was.
thank God for Narcan, and but there's
Absolutely.
other people that, you know, have a different view of it. You know, especially locally at the time. But
Yeah, they just need to be changed.
yes.
I think that
Yes.
perspective is changing for
Yes,
sure.
it is.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We just talked to a doctor the other day who talked about how the perception of methadone needs to change as well, because it is a life-saving
Yes.
drug for a lot of people.
No,
Absolutely.
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 I mean, me personally, at first, when I got sober, I was against all that. You know,
thought,
but
right,
you
you
know what I
thought it
mean?
was
It's
only
saving
one
lives,
way.
and it's keeping people around and giving them another shot, and it's saving families. And I've completely flipped on that whole
Completely
subject.
changed.
Right.
Notice though it's education. Like I
Yes.
mean, we got more educated on what it actually was. You know, so.
Well, I
that's why.
think for me, like I got sober, it was like abstinence. I was beat into my head, like, and for me early on, it's like that's what works, but it doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
And we're all different, and our chemistry is different, and
Right.
our backgrounds are different. So
Staying alive,
Learning,
staying alive is my
learning.
motto. Yep. Isn't that a song?
Staying alive,
Yes.
staying alive.
Staying alive, right. I
Yes.
mean, if you can stay alive whatever way you can do it is my
Right.
motto. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
So can we end with a little name dropping? Who did you play with?
I mean, the late '90s
Throw out a
Patriots.
few names.
Well, I played with Brady, and I was back the Drew Bledsoe years.
Okay.
McGinnis, Ted Johnson. That was in Pittsburgh with Jerome Bettis and Bill
Ted
Cowher.
Brewski
and-
lived in your house.
Well,
Yeah.
for a little while, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a different
Venice,
time.
he was the fridge, right? Or the
no,
not the fridge,
no,
what?
the bus. Yeah,
The bus. The
yeah.
bus.
Who was
The
the
fridge.
bus?
Jerome Bettis.
Oh, see,
yeah.
I don't watch
The
football.
bus.
Yeah,
I
it was.
remember
You know
those
what?
days.
It's life. When you get older, life flies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been 22 years. And it's like when you're a kid, it drags on, or you don't pay attention to time.
Right. Yeah.
You're like, oh God.
22 years in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
you fast forward 22, and you're like, I don't even want to say I'll be 70 something.
I know.
Yeah.
And I'll be older.
But yeah, a lot's changed up at the stadium there. I never played in the new stadium. I was all in the old Sullivan Stadium, or I don't even know what it was called, Foxborough Stadium.
Foxborough Stadium.
So we had a dog, and we named him Rodney Harrison.
Oh, nice.
And I appreciate the fact that my husband allowed us to name him Rodney Harrison, because I had the hugest crush on Rodney Harrison at
Yeah.
the time.
Oh, that's funny.
He was great, such a phenomenal
Yes.
player. Did you play with him?
No, he was right after me.
Okay.
He was he right? Yeah, he was definitely, probably a year after, after I stopped. You know, I never retired. I just never showed back up. That was kind of my retirement.
Okay.
I got in trouble and didn't want to deal with it. So,
And that
so
was the end.
sick. You know, the crazy thing is, my first pill I took in September. In June of that year, I gave up football. So 6 months after
Wow.
Taking my first pill, I gave up what I had done for 22, 23 years.
Wow.
That's
And it was an easy decision. It was more important to chase, not being myself and chasing that high and chase that drink than it was
half-hour feeling.
It's amazing
Yeah.
what it can do to you.
It really is. It's amazing how powerful it is, and it doesn't take everyone, and not everyone is going to become an addict or an alcoholic or substance use disorder, but certain people it definitely fit the criteria more than others.
And you never know. I think
Yeah,
that's
you
another
don't.
important message for parents, is that you just never know. So
No.
why would you allow your kids to play that game of Russian
No.
roulette?
That is another point, too, I had learned during this whole process is any kids who drink 15, 16 years old, what is the percentage? There's like 25% more likely to become an alcoholic if they start drinking that young, like 1 in 4. And whenever I heard that, I was like, oh my God, like I never would have thought that, because the human brain isn't capable of taking it, and it makes you more predisposed to become an alcoholic.
Exactly.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
One of the moms had mentioned that at one of our talks the other day. She said, I never realized that it affects their brain different than it would affect our brain.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. As parents, we don't want bad things to happen to our kids, for sure. Nobody wants to encourage risky behavior or place their children in harm's way. But there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of education that needs to take place for parents to make those appropriate decisions.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Substance Free 02043. I'm your host, Kristen Root with Hingham Cares, and I want to thank you for joining us and hope you'll tune in next time.